Today on Conversation Aloud, we're talking about how to navigate a world that feels like it's constantly pulling us apart, politically, emotionally, spiritually. How do you stay grounded when the outrage is rewarded, when empathy feels like weakness, when resilience gets mistaken for kind of emotional detachment? To help us answer all those questions, we're joined by someone who's made it her life work to wrestle with these tension. Shermin Kruse. She's an award-winning writer and negotiation strategist. She's a law professor, TEDx producer, and the author of the book Stoic Empathy. In it, she explores how we can live both with compassion and strength, not by picking one or the other, but by learning how to hold them together. Welcome to the show, Sharmin.
Thank you so much. It's such a pleasure to be here on Conversations Aloud. I'm very excited.
Great to have you. Sharmin, I would like to start from the beginning. You know, you were born in Iran during a time of, political upheaval, a lot of challenges. It must have been um, a very, I guess, interesting, difficult, challenging time to kind of grow up. How did that experience of what Iran was going at that time shape how you view resilience and freedom?
Well, I was born in 1977. The Islamic Revolution took place in 1979. So I was born in the chaos, leading up to the revolution. And then my childhood was spent in post-revolutionary Iran. I remained there until I was 11 years old. And as I'm sure you can imagine, the post-revolutionary chaos was its own. As often is the case with revolutions, different groups had banded together in order to bring about the end of the last regime. And then there was some infighting for powers. Those groups vied for power among themselves. And so it was many of the democratic revolutionaries themselves that were assassinated by the revolutionaries themselves in the immediate aftermath of the revolution. So it was a very distrustful time, right? And it was a time when rules were being imposed that had not become cultural norms, that did not exist a year ago, and that were quite stringent. So adaptability and being able to read the room and being able to identify who your friends are and who your friends aren't were skills that were necessary for survival in that society. In the meantime, Iraq, the neighboring country, declared war on Iran. And that was a protracted 10-year-long war that resulted in the loss of 1 million lives. There was 40 million people living in Iran at the time. So if you can imagine, that's about 1 out of every 40 people. That's a extremely high amount in the population, massive amounts of civilian casualties. By the time I left in 88, there was up to 6 missile attacks a day into Tehran. And that again, a different form of resiliency, right? It's not just missile attacks, but it's also bread lines and electricity shortages. And it's not just an oppressive government, but it's also lack of availability of products, goods, medicines, And so the determination of my people was nothing short of remarkable. But it's not all that unique. You see people's overcoming things like this, or I know you're filming from the UK, the very famous what is it? Live calm and carry on, or stay calm and carry on, of London,
Yeah,
during
yeah.
World War II. Keep calm and carry on. That's what it was. So the idea is, and this is the saying of London during World War II, the idea being, hey, you still have to go to school. You still have to go to your job. You still have to make the economy turn because you still have to feed your kids, and you still have to. So it was still like a fully functional economy within that context. And so there was a lot of, okay, there are no there are no sirens today. That means we can go to school. Let's get your uniform on. Let's figure this out. Okay, so you have to do these chants in the schoolyard that are in complete opposition to the way you're being raised. But this is what you have to do to survive the day. And that was the environment. So resilience and adaptability were my primary educations growing up. In fact, I feel sometimes that other than the empathy, I learned little else in my childhood other than how to read a room and adapt to it.
That's really interesting that you also mention empathy here, because one would imagine that during a war, there isn't uh, much empathy. There is a lot of anger targeted towards the person that's attacking your country, and at the same time, you have your government who is also causing a lot of anger with the people. How were you able to kind of cultivate that empathy um, you know, during such war, an internal war and an external war happening with another country?
Yeah. Not only is that an excellent observation and question, it's also true. There is a lot of anger and there is a lot of otherness, right? They are the ones that are harming us, whether the they is the morality guard or the they is the Iraqis, or, if you bought into what the regime was saying, then the they is the West, right? Whatever it is, theism is something that occurs far more in situations of strain, war, suffering, etc. And a lot of that is the propaganda machine. A lot of that is just human nature. For me, there was some of that, and I don't want to deny that I was raised among humans, and it wasn't, I didn't receive a Buddhist upbringing of peacefulness and acceptance. What I received, however, was the anger often interrupted by compassion. Despite the anger, right, what you would see, and you see this is humanity too, incredible kindnesses, incredible capability to understand and to be strong for one another, right? So it was the very empathic awareness of one another's weaknesses that would sometimes make us strong. And then there was also my parents, who were just remarkable people. Back at that time growing up, one of the schoolyard chants was "Death to Iraq," which is, a horrible thing to be forcing school children to be chanting vigorously and vociferously in the schoolyard on a daily basis. And yet it was the easiest one to buy into. They were raining attacks on our streets. And I very, very specifically remember my parents having conversations with us about that this is a ridiculous thing to be chanting, that this puts the blame on Iraqi people, and that the people are not responsible for this conflict, that their leaders are just as selfish and misguided as our own, and they are the ones that are responsible for this conflict. And so even in that moment, there was a display for me growing up of, let's take a step back and let's really engage in a wise, rational assessment. Because yes, there are issues, there are problems, and yes, external power dynamics exist, and there are bad guys in the world. Let's try to make a wiser determination as to who to look upon and who to blame, and to do so with an empathic understanding of what the other is also going through at this time. And so that was modeled for me. Again, I'm not saying folks weren't angry. They were angry, but listen, you either lost your mind or you kept your mind together. And with my family, we were taught to keep our mind together, and that's how we were raised.
Yeah, that's beautiful, because it takes a lot of, I would say, energy and courage to not be infused within the emotions that you're feeling, and to take a step back and to see, from a helicopter level of, actually, they're just kind of going through the same thing as we're going through. It's the leaders that are pushing our countries to war and death and destruction. and seeing them as humans, which is such a difficult thing to do during war, right?
Yeah.
Your emotions want to make you kind of focus on them not being humans because it makes it easier to kind of move and survive. So that must require a lot of energy to do so. But it kind of touches on, I guess, your book about Stoic empathy, your ability to kind of remove the have more reason than be led by reason than emotion perspective. So that's really interesting that you shared that, and kind of the death to Iraq, and I'm sure death to America. I was also I lived in Iraq, so I can connect to that statement, but from the opposite side.
From
So
the
I
opposite
completely
side.
understand that.
Yeah.
What is something that you feel people really misunderstand the most about Iran right now?
It's interesting because for this tiny little country with not a super high GDP, it gets a lot of press, and it's I think one of the places in the world that I think people understand it better than, say, the Democratic Republic of Congo. You know what I mean? Or Sierra Leone,
Mm,
or some small Asian community, because of the position that it has in the Middle East, because of the dynamics that it's been involved in international politics, as well as the American issues and hostilities. And so what do they primarily misunderstand? And again, I will say I have to give people the benefit of the doubt. The reality is geopolitics is an incredibly complex and ever changing and ever morphing matter. There's a lot of countries in this world, and there's a lot of cultures to keep track of in addition to our own. And we're already so disconnected, even if just by not speaking the language or being geographically distant from a people's. But of course, when you're an Iranian or when you're an Iraqi, you have things to add about your culture and your community that most people are not aware of. What I would say about my own is the top two things that people misunderstand about our people is, first, how resilient we are. These are people who keep going out on the street. They keep dying. I mean, it's really kind of incredible and remarkable, the spirit for revolution that persists in this country, that hasn't been killed yet, and and maybe never will. And that is an extraordinary hopeful thought. And in dark times, what else do we have but the ray of hope? So that is one thing, is the incredible strength. And the other is, and this can be said of all of our people in the Middle East, is the hospitality, is the welcomeness, is how much pleasure it gives us to bring joy to someone else, especially someone that we're hosting. It's a core component of our ethic. I mean, it's like ancient Greece, right? Somebody could be your enemy, but if they're a guest in your home, you don't touch them.
yeah,
And that and
yeah.
that's a reality, right? And it's kind of cool. And the fact that this ethic is there, this ethic of care, and if you're within my four walls, you're my responsibility, and I need to take care of you. There's something really extraordinary there that tells us a lot about the human spirit as well. And so I would say those two things, but obviously there's a massive number of things. People misunderstand the drug scene. People misunderstand the party scene. People misunderstand the sex scene, the music scene, the film scene. I mean, there's so many things because you're not living in that community or culture. More or less, I think people get the country, and the immigrant population has been quite loud in its disruptions. And so hopefully they're seeing us as well as distinct from our regime. And that is the hope.
100%, yeah. And that's the one thing that when people go to the Middle East, to Iran, they always talk about the hospitality. It's always the first thing they're shocked by, how the hospitality is another level, for sure. When you left Iran, it seems like because you hear that Iran obviously controls a lot of the information that is given to their people, and I don't know how it was in the 70s and 80s. I'm sure it was the same thing. But when you left, it seems like your parents have already prepared you in terms of what the government does and the bad things that it does, and so and the fact that the West isn't maybe the enemy. So when you left Iran, there wasn't a huge shock for you, kind of seeing from the outside how Iran is seen, or was it a shock for you?
It was surprising for me. I was surprised at the level of hostility when I moved, because we dreamed of immigrating, right? It wasn't just that what the regime is saying, might not be true. It was the opposite is true. I mean, it was our vision of what we were entering was a utopia that simply doesn't exist in the human realm, and yet it existed in our minds. And so what we entered was a situation in the West that was far, far superior to our own. And to this day, I remain grateful to Canada for taking me in at the time that it did, and to the United States for having been my home for the last 25 years. And it is not a utopia. It is imperfect. And for those of us who undergo the strain of immigration, we also leave behind so much, particularly socioeconomic status. And without that status also comes judgment in society, even democratic societies, right? And so we get here and we realize that, like, streets aren't paved with gold, and not everybody is perfect, and not everyone is treated the same. And that realization can be quite jarring. It can also be jarring to suddenly be in an environment where nobody understands what you're saying. Like, I went to a school with no other Iranians when I immigrated. And so nobody knew how smart I was, right? I know that sounds silly, but a lot of people who don't speak the predominant language will say that is, you don't know how smart I am in my own language. I'm really smart. I'm not stupid. Don't treat me like I'm stupid. And or how interesting I am. Wouldn't everybody in the class want to have lunch with me? I'm a middle school kid. I was having lunch by myself every single day. And that can be traumatizing for a middle school kid, even one fleeing a war zone, because guess what? Back in the war zone, everyone understood what I was saying, knew how smart I was, and I had friends and family and cousins and people who related to me and rules I understood. And now I have to navigate this entire new system. So honestly, it was one shock or another. Some of the shocks were positive. I will say that. I remember being shocked because back home, because it was during a war, you were not allowed to walk on the grass, because growing grass what was a huge energy drain. And if you tread on the grass, it could impact the grass's ability to grow.
Right.
And it was just that tiny little patch of grass. So there was always signs that said, do not
Mm.
walk on the grass. And I got to Canada, and they were laying down sod, when they roll the
Yeah.
grass down, and they actually want you to walk on it because it settles the seeds into the soil. So there was literally signs that said, please walk on the grass. And I remember that, like, as a child. And then I remember taking off my shoes and just feeling the blades between my feet, and how extraordinary that was to an 11-year-old child. And so there were many positive, incredibly pleasant, brilliant surprises, but there were also many negative ones. And it was just an adjustment. It was a big difference. And as I said, I remain eternally grateful for the opportunities that have been provided to me in the last 30 some years of my life, and eternally guilt-ridden at the fact that I have so many brothers and sisters, not just Iran, but also in Iraq and other places back home, who do not have the opportunity to be seen in this way. And yet, yeah, it definitely wasn't all peaches and cream.
Yeah, yeah. I totally resonate with that in terms of realizing every place has its benefits and drawbacks. There is no kind of perfect place for sure. When you was there a moment when you realized that your past, the uh, if I'm right to say, the trauma that you experienced as a child, the memory, when you realized that that could be a source of power, and not just kind of grief?
Yeah. So here's the thing. It's not the trauma that is the power. It's the overcoming, right? It's the knowledge gained. So trauma can be incredibly disempowering. It can weaken you, it can kill you. And honestly, so can stress. It doesn't even have to be trauma. I mean, just like I see sometimes people, going so fast, their hearts so fast, their minds, their guts so panicked with cortisol that it's killing them. And
Mm,
I can see it in the way they eat, in the way they exercise, in their health. And the reality is those things can kill you. I don't think it's the trauma itself. I think it's the overcoming of the experience and the learning from the experience. So all of life is not the hand that you are dealt. All of life is how you respond to the hand that you are dealt. All of life, right? Now we are all dealt different hands, and that colors our response. And I think it's really important to be mindful of that my capacity to rationally or wisely evaluate a situation, even as a child in a war-torn country post-revolution, is going to be vastly different because of the way my parents behaved, because of maybe the fact that I was a full-term baby and I was always well-fed, and well-rested. These are things that impacted my response. But so did I. There is an aspect of me there also, of will, of sure, these are the cards I've been dealt. They are what they are. I've been dealt them, but I get to play them now. And how I do that is going to say something about me, and that therein is where the power lies. And it's quite extraordinary and remarkable because that is human power, and we do take it with us no matter where we are, who we are, or how we're dealt. It varies. We would be fools to deny those variations. We would be fools to deny external power dynamics exist. And yet it would be a useless life if we denied our own power as well.
mm. Agreed. So what you're saying is that the trauma can give you perspective, and that allows you to grow and understand things in a better way. Um, but also how what is powerful is agency. It's how you respond
Yeah.
to things, and how you choose to respond, and that is the power that we all hold.
Yeah, 100%. And so sometimes when I see people who are trauma ridden, and I've worked somewhat in human rights relief situations. My sister is with the UN, and she's with the UNHCR, so she's in relief situations all the time. It's her daily life. I've been in it much less than she has, but to some extent, and then I've observed it, and I've seen trauma tear people apart and rip them to shreds and destroy them. I've seen just regular PTSD on the south side of Chicago to kids who have just been shot at way too many times destroy their lives and their ability to respond to things in an appropriate way. And I just think it's really important to acknowledge that trauma does not necessarily result in power, and it can. And that is an extraordinary viewpoint. And again, I come back to, if we don't have hope, what do we have? If we don't have our will, if we don't have that space between stimuli and response, if we cannot claim that space for ourselves and input ourselves into that space between stimuli and response, then what do we even have? We aren't even alive, right? We're
We're
automatons.
just reacting.
We're just reacting. Exactly.
Yeah.
We're
Yeah.
ones and zeros.
Yeah. Yeah, it's and I guess this connects to your book, Stoic Empathy. It brings two things together, which some people might say are opposite ideas. Stoicism, which is to value and use reason over maybe emotions, let's say, and empathy, which is trying to understand other people's feelings and emotions. What inspired you to fuse those two together in such a way?
So there's this really remarkable thing that the ancient Stoics held as a pillar, and and besides logic and rationality, it was the concept of justice, which today is what we might refer to as moralism, right? The idea that the Stoics rejected emotions is usually incorrect. It's rather they allowed their emotions to inform them rather than be their masters, and to inform them as to what the just path was. So the way we would see that in modern day, interpreted into our language, is my anger is good because it makes me respond. Fear, oh my God, there's a saber-toothed tiger coming my way. Those things can kill me. I am afraid, therefore I will run. Therefore I will not die by the saber-toothed tiger, right? If I didn't have that fear, I'd be dead. And so these emotions are helpful to you. They can give you information. What the Stoics feared is permitting the emotions to control you and to be your masters, and to sort of allow you to behave in a way that is inconsistent with what they termed justice, what I would call is your own moral value system. So the idea would be, rather than our immediate instinctive emotive response ruling us, because how many times has that been, as we ourselves would deem it, a mistake? It's inconsistent with who we want to be, how we want to show up, and what we value overall, or what they might call justice, right? And yet we experience them, right? So they don't want that domination to occur. They're just like, hey, I'm going to let this inform me, but I'm not going to let it dominate me. I am going to dominate it. And because there is more to me than my emotions. They are a thing that exists. I must acknowledge their existence. They can enrich my life massively, right? They can bring beauty and joy and laughter and levity and remarkable and love and remarkable things into my life. What the Stoics term as passion, they don't mean the way we think about passion today. To them, passion is a momentary loss of control. And so we have to sort of like understand the linguistic vernacular with which they were speaking when we interpret their words. So what they're saying is allow your emotions to be inputs. Okay. Do not allow them to be the only thing that results in an output. Right. And when we really think of it this way, we really easily understand the role that empathy plays, because empathy here is just our ability to emotively understand and connect with the world around us. Right. We cannot maneuver the world, including the people in it, unless we understand feelings and those of the people in this world, right? And so we must understand the thoughts, the feelings, the judgments of others, not to justify them, to excuse them, to align with them, right? Not necessarily even to feel them, but just to grasp them so that we can allow them to inform us just as much as our own emotions, thoughts, feelings, and judgments, so that we can allow those to inform us. And then we can take all of that information, again, not just about emotions, but about other things external to them, right? And use that to form a decision that's consistent with who we want to be in that moment, because we have chosen that path ourselves, and not because we lost control of who we were in that moment.
Yeah.
So that's the goal. And so, when you really see it that way, it actually, this seeming duality, and you're 100% correct, it is a seeming duality and dichotomy, really starts to look like a symbiosis. And we can easily understand. We can easily see all the times in which our understanding of ourselves in the room is precisely what led us to be calm, to be stoic in a situation that would otherwise have demanded outrage or anger or violence or fear or jealousy or anxiety, right? And it is because we were able to keep our sights on the truth of the matter. That truth includes emotions, but it's not limited to them.
Yeah, and that's such a powerful place to be in, to choose not to react to things and to choose how to respond and to see emotions as information. And the issue, I think, for a lot of people is how do you cultivate that? Because, sometimes you don't even realize you're reacting, and suddenly you wake up, you're like, oh, what did I just say? That
Guilty, yeah.
yeah, that happens a lot, especially when there's anger. And then you realize, actually, why am I choosing to do this? I can choose
Mhm.
something else. But that might be a day later.
Right. Might be a day
um,
later.
so how do you cultivate that for anyone listening right now?
Yeah. So I will say that's the main reason I wrote the book. The book is more of a guidebook. I mean, sometimes it feels like a memoir, but it's really more of a guidebook. Here are the tools. Here are the exercises. Here's how we can get better at this. Here are the tools I use because you know what? Stoic empathy is a practice like yoga or meditation. It's not a thing you master. It's not, I mean, people might think of you as a master just because you've been practicing it longer. But it's not a thing you master. It is simply a practice. Here's how I practice. Here's how the Stoics did it. Here's how cognitive behavioral therapists do it. Here's how Buddhists do it, right? Here's the science of it. Here's if you like connect a Buddhist's brain to an fMRI machine, what happens to it during a meditation? How can we slow down that space? Earlier, we were talking about the space between stimuli and response, right? It's not just the space, but it's also a time span, right? How do we slow it down so that we can expand this space? I mean, imagine yourself as you're in the UK, so I suppose a cricket player. I don't know the soccer player. Let's go with the soccer player.
Okay.
You
Yeah.
know, I would tell you if I got in a soccer field with one of these great soccer stars, I would feel like that ball is moving so freaking fast that my eyes cannot keep up, much less my feet or my body. Right? I'm not coordinated and able to see it in time, but the
Yeah,
players can.
it's like when you're also learning to drive.
Oh
Everything is
my God,
coming at you,
so fast,
and it's so fast.
so fast.
It's just your heart's racing, and now you're just like singing with the radio and driving calmly, and it's just the change is huge. Yeah.
100%. That is what I love the driving analogy. It is such a good one. I used the sports one in the past, although I might switch to the driving one now because it's so good. But I used the sports one in the past because a lot of sports stars will tell you you've got to slow down the game. You got to slow down. What does that mean? What does that even mean? How do you slow down how fast the ball moves? But you know, and I know, and we all know because we all also drive. So to your point, you got to slow down the way the cars in the road move. Yeah, it's the same thing, right? With interactions. It's the same thing with emotions. It's the same thing with judgments. It's not that you don't see the ball. It's not that you don't see the ball coming and therefore are not able to formulate a plan on how to respond to it. It's just that it's moving so fast that you react, you respond before it's even happened, and then after it's happened, and then you're all confused and you don't know what happened. And now you have to look back and evaluate it and break it down in order to see where you went wrong. But if you're a practice player, you can do better. Again, you're never going to be perfect, but you can do better. What's even more remarkable is let's look at it in a different context. That's also a physical context. In a boxing context, you can get punched in the face and not lose track of yourself, not get disoriented. You can get punched in the face for 3 hours straight and still formulate an analysis. How tired am I? How tired is my opponent? In what degree do I need to turn my cheek to minimize the impact of the hit? How much strength do I have? What is my strategy here? And so, and the greats, of course, the greats can do this as well as a Buddhist monk could, right? And so this is where we want to be. We want to let the pain, the joy, the thrill, the emotion, the anger, whatever it might be, being hurled and thrown at us, even if it's a punch in the face, right? And we want to moderate it, and we want to remain in control of it. And the best way to do that is to have practice getting punched in the face, or driving a car, or, playing soccer, or meditating, right? And so the Stoics have tools. One of those tools is called discomfort embracing. And the whole idea of this is that I will choose a safe context. Maybe that safe context is meditation. Maybe that safe context is some other context. And in that safe context, I will practice the thing I'm uncomfortable with. So if I'm uncomfortable with confrontation, because I just always equate confrontation with conflict, which those two things are very different. But if I'm uncomfortable with confrontation, maybe what I can do is every time I go to a Starbucks, try to negotiate a free shot of vanilla in my latte. No harm, no foul. They say no, I pay like 75 cents and it is what it is, and I still get my vanilla, right? But at least I practice that confrontation in a warm and comfortable settings. A lot of Silicon Valley CEOs will take ice baths in the morning. A lot of athletes will become comfortable with sweat, with pain. So we need to do the same thing with whatever emotional state it is that we find uncomfortable. And maybe for you, that is vulnerability. Maybe for you, that is not confrontation. Maybe you do just fine with confrontation. And what you need to be practiced at is exposure, or joy, or gratitude. The goal for each of us is different, and each of us have growth to do. We evaluate where we're uncomfortable. We accustom ourselves to it so that when the discomfort occurs, we are better able to slow down the game and to expand that space between stimuli and response so that we can react with greater justice.
Yeah, no, that's beautiful, and it reminds me of something I also say to myself all the time, which is slow is smooth, smooth is fast.
I love
Which kind of helps me to slow things down,
it.
because
Mhm.
we associate slowness with I don't want to be slow because it's slow, but actually if you just slow it down, you're actually going to go fast.
Yeah,
And it reminded me also of that when you said cold showers, that's exactly what I do, because you're putting yourself in an environment where it's stressful on your body, and you can feel the emotions, you can feel the chemicals kind of pumping, and you have to relax yourself in that environment and put yourself in a
amazing.
relaxed state,
Yeah,
uh, intentionally, which allows you to do that in real life when that happens.
right.
So, to your point, I think exposure is such a beautiful tool to use to manage that for sure.
Yeah, and the good thing about the book is that it's full of them. I mean, it's so exposure, whether you call it exposure therapy or discomfort embracing or habituation is one. Meditation can be another. Understanding the impermanence of life is a huge tool of the Stoics. They have this thing they call memento mori, which is remember you must die, which sounds really dark, but it actually really means remember you're not dead yet, and that you will die, that this life is temporary, that this moment is temporary. And that does two things for you. One, it allows you to align your values in a moment, right? With a wiser sense of this is a temporary pain. Your shower, your cold discomfort is a temporary pain. It will end no matter what. It will end, right? Because it all ends, right? Regardless of what you believe via an afterlife, this life will end. And so I need to A, enjoy the heck out of everything I can, B, not stress out over the stupid little things like traffic. I practice my stoicism in traffic every day, because I live in Chicago. And here, everyone's got a gun. If you have road rage, somebody could just whip out a gun and like shoot you. It's not a joke. I mean, the people are angry just because you cut in front of them, and you're angry because someone cut in front of you, and the consequences can be dire. And yet I live in Chicago. There's going to be traffic. It's going to happen every day. Idiots are going to cut in front of me. I mean, it's just a thing that's going to happen, right? And so how do I make this drive from my home to downtown in a manner that is as peaceful as possible, no matter how many forces of erratic driving are hurled my way? And so these are the things that you can do. And so the book is full of these. It's full of meditations, full of tools. And then it's also full of the empathic portion. In fact, the first half of the book does the part of helping you read the room. Because also, maybe this guy's not an idiot. Maybe they're just a new driver. Maybe they are a student driver. Maybe their husband died this morning. And the last thing they want to think about right now is how to smoothly merge with traffic, right? You don't know. You don't know anything, right? You really don't. And so how do I, A, if it's possible, gather that awareness, or B, if it's not possible, release the judgment? Because I don't know. And so the reality is I can then allow that empathic awareness to inform my trial and practice of the regulation, the emotional regulation, the Stoic regulation, right? So that I can allow it to bring me peace or calm or wisdom or speed or decisiveness, whatever it is the moment calls for. Yeah.
Yeah, no, that's beautiful. And I guess the two things that I'm getting from that is, number one, you get to choose what experience you want to have. Going back to your point about your driving, and you're telling yourself, what kind of experience do I want to have right now, and how am I going to create that experience? I am the one that chooses that, and if I'm choosing something else, that's actually my choice. And two, it's realizing that that person going through the emotions of whatever they're going, I guess one isn't about me, and kind of seeing that, but also seeing that he's human and he's going through something, and being able to see that allows you to choose how to respond to that in the best possible way for yourself, but also to maybe influence that person to and impact him, right?
100%. And it's really important. I love one of the things that you just said is like, to the extent you want to influence that person and impact him, which puts you in the role of an advocate, right? And puts you in the role of a negotiator, it puts you in the role of someone actively engaged in that interaction. You must have that awareness that, listen, I want to convince this person to be something or do something or think something that they don't right now think or do or are, right? To the extent that's not your goal, you just want to make it to downtown in peace, that requires then a different type of regulation, right? And a different kind of release. And so it's also that empathic awareness of the room, the road, the world allows you to read yourself better. What is my goal in this scenario? And if I am an advocate, which I have so much respect for advocates, it is, my job is to convince people, right? But if I'm a mediator, my job is not to convince people or to align myself with any side. My job is to get two people who hate each other to understand one another. And that's a very different job. And it's really important to understand that distinction. And we have different roles in different aspects of our lives. It's not up to me, Shermin, to tell you who to be in any given set of circumstances. What I'm saying is, utilizing these tools, you can make that judgment as you move from circumstance to circumstance with intentionality. Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah, no, yeah, totally agree with what you're saying. And I think, if ever, now is the best time to utilize those tools, as we live in a world whereby we're being influenced left, right, and center by everything around us, from social media to the news to our leaders to everyone, and it's very hard not to react. Even for a professional person who has learned all the ways not to react, it's actually a difficult environment. Um, just lastly, when you think about the leaders in you're based in the U.S. right now,
Yeah.
the leaders that you have in the U.S.
Yeah.
What is something that you hope they can obtain to make them a better leader in today's world?
Yeah. It's such an important question. I'm always reminded of a line from one of my favorite movies that says, makers of man, creators of leaders, be careful what kind of leaders you create here today. Just because someone has leadership, it doesn't mean they're acting justly, right? Even if you just look at ancient Greece, there was Marcus Aurelius, but there was also Emperor Nero. Power can be corruptive, and I would not wish that level of power on myself or on my children because of its corruptive impact. And yet we have Marcus Aurelius. And so what I would wish is for people to conceptualize their empathic awareness of the world as for what it is: information, power, awareness, and alignment with morality, with what really matters. Again, remember, you will die. And the legacy that you leave behind, especially as someone who can impact millions, if not billions of lives, right? The responsibility is massive, and you must proceed with greater thoughtfulness towards that impact. That is my greatest wish. And may you, the leaders of tomorrow and the leaders of today, continue to develop those habits as much as possible. By mere virtue of having power, you do not gain these things. In fact, you are more likely to lose them. And so I hope people are able to take that step, and to take that step toward awareness, intellectual curiosity, and as a general matter, control over themselves and over the type of human being that they would like to be. And so even regardless whether you agree with Mr. Musk or Mr. Trump in this decision or in that decision, the reality is we see leaders jumping out with emotions all the time. And that is what we don't want to see. We want to see a reasoned response, a thoughtful, long-term strategic goal in mind for the long-term relationship, and an awareness of the responsibility. Because with great power does come great responsibility. Voltaire was right. And so was Spider-Man's uncle. And, it's real. And we can all apply that to our own lives as well.
Shermin, thank you so much for that. It's been beautiful speaking to you. Where can people find your book, reach out to you, and find more about you?
Thank you so much. The book can be found anywhere books are sold. Feel free to click a button on Amazon. Feel free to request it from your local bookstore. I am on social media, all of that stuff that comes at you 100 times a day and tries to control you. I'm on Instagram and LinkedIn because I'm too old to be on X and TikTok. And so feel free to find me there. There's also my website. You can go to stoicempathy.com or sherminkruse.com. It would be my honor if you gave my book some of your time. I'm grateful for your time today and for this fantastic conversation and this amazing audience. Thank you.
Shermin, thank you so much.